Boom, it's working. Okay, morning guys. Warning, this is probably the most exciting thing you're going to see all day, so get excited. Hopefully it enhances your Saturday or Sunday whenever you watch this. We left off block day on talking about levels of organization. So we're going to move on to, this is still part of our organization. But we have a general organization in our body. We have two main pieces, and that's the axial portion of our body and the appendicular portion. Okay, the axial portion contains your head, your neck, and your trunk. So if we look over on the left here, we've got the head, we've got the neck, and we've got the trunk. Okay, axial meaning axis. Okay, axis is the center point from which things come off. Then over on the right, we have the appendicular portion, which, well, actually, this is both portions, but you can see a nice demonstration of axial versus appendicular. Here we have the axial, head, neck, and trunk, and then appendicular is our arms and our legs, so our appendages, appendicular. Okay, so branching off from that, we're going to start by looking at the axial body cavities. Okay, we've got several body cavities, and the axial portion has two main parts, the dorsal body cavities and the ventral body cavities. So the dorsal body cavity contains the cranial cavity and the spinal canal, or vertebral canal. Okay, so cranial cavity has our brain and our spinal cavity, so let's look at what that looks like. I'm on the Duke Anatomy website, and they've got some great images. If you are ever looking things up, go to duke.edu/anatomy. Okay, so if we go down here, this is instructions on how to dissect a skull, because they actually do cadavers where they dissect human bodies. We're not going to do that. But we are going to look at some of these pictures. So this is a superior view of the cranial cavity. Okay, the brain is taken out, obviously, but you can see this is where the brain sits. And then this hole right in here is where the vertebra runs down into, the spinal cord runs down next to your vertebra. This picture on the left is a lateral view. They have cut this skull down the sagittal plane, and you can see inside this is where the brain would sit. If we go down here, this is how they cut the skull for this right image here. It's a transverse cut, and they had to peel back some flaps and some muscle before they were able to cut. If you go down further, you can see this is where the brain would set inside the cranial cavity. And we can go down even further and see a lateral view of this cranial cavity. Okay, so that's cranial. Now, we're inside the axial body cavities. We're talking about the dorsal body cavities, and that was the cranial. Now we're going to talk about spinal. This contains your spinal cord. Okay. There is an article, Changes in Spinal Canal Diameter and Vertebral Body Height with Age. So if you go to the National Institute of Health website, nih.gov, there are some amazing articles. This one studied the growth of the vertebral height, so you can see that they're measuring the height of these vertebrae here over time. I'm not going to give away the findings, but you can go read the article if you're interested. But up here at the top, we can see the cranial cavity, and then running down along the posterior side of the body, you can see the vertebra, which looks like this snake type thing. Right next to the snake is this thin cord, which is your spinal cord. Okay. So, axial body cavities. Let me go back to this. Axial body cavities, the dorsal cavities, these ones in yellow. We have cranial, we have vertebral. Now let's look at the ventral body cavities. Those are these ones here in the front. Ventral meaning front, dorsal meaning back. Remember, dorsal fin on a shark, okay, that's on the back. All right, ventral, and there's two main regions, really three, but we have the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic. Okay, in the thoracic cavity, you have your heart and lungs, and esophagus and trachea. Inside of there, you have a pleural space, which contains your lungs. You have a pericardial space or cavity that contains your heart. And then you have, obviously, you have two lungs. Those two pleural cavities, the right and left, are separated by a mediastinum. Now I have this quick little video on a pleural effusion, which is an abnormality in the pleura of the lungs. So let's take a look at that. We won't watch the whole thing, but it'll show us what the pleura are.
Inside the ribcage, the lungs are surrounded by a moist, double-layered membrane called the pleura. Normally, there is a small amount of fluid which lubricates the surfaces of the pleural membranes. A pleural effusion is an abnormal accumulation of fluid between the membranes. There are two types of effusions that can develop. Transudative effusions are caused by an underlying disease or disorder that disrupts the normal pressures in the lungs, compromising the ability of the blood vessels in the chest to remove excess fluid within the pleural space. Types of disorders that can cause transudative effusions include congestive heart failure, cirrhosis, and atelectasis. It is also associated with some medical procedures, such as peritoneal dialysis. Exudative effusions are caused by lung diseases, resulting in inflammation of the pleura due to infection or disease.
Okay, so we can see the pleura is that area that contains the heart and the lungs. Okay, that's our thoracic cavity. Okay, thoracic cavity, which is in the ventral body cavities. Okay. Next we have an x-ray of the thoracic cavity, which I think is a pretty good one. We can see clearly the heart, which is number 1 here. We can see the fibrous pericardium, which is the sac that contains the heart. It's that cavity where the heart sits. And then we have these layers of serous, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the serous is basically what the fluid that holds the heart. Okay, and then number 6, we've got the pleural cavities and the lungs. Okay, lungs are inside of the pleural cavity. Okay, after this, I have a great superior view. This was a transverse cut of the thoracic cavity, but we can see the right lung, the left lung over here, and then you've got the heart with all the major veins and arteries coming off of it. And we can see the esophagus in there. We can see the vertebra, the spinal cord down here. We've got the ribs and the sternum. So I think this is just a great view of the thoracic cavity. Okay, now ventral body cavities. Talking about ventral body cavities, we had the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic. Okay, abdominopelvic is split into two main cavities, abdominal and the pelvic. So abdominal cavity contains your stomach, spleen, liver, gallbladder, and small intestine. And then the pelvic cavity contains part of the large intestine, the urinary bladder, and reproductive organs. Here is a woman, 25-year-old woman, who had a mishap during surgery. It wasn't her fault, but the doctors basically left this surgical sponge, you see in figure D, they left that inside of her. So this is a radiograph of her abdominopelvic region, and these arrows here and here are pointing to some abnormalities. Okay, B here, this is a CT scan of her axial region of her body, but you can see this huge thing, foreign object in there. That is the sponge that they left in during surgery. And unfortunately, that happens more often than you might think. They take counts of all of their utensils and things like that they're using, but this actually used to happen more often than not. They would leave objects in patients. Kind of scary. Okay, so abdominopelvic region. And that's just an explanation of those photographs from the previous slide. So if you want to read through that, you can. Okay, so review of the body cavities. We've got dorsal, the yellow, and we've got ventral, the red. Dorsal's on the back, ventral's on the front. Dorsal, we have the cranial cavity and the vertebral column or cavity, okay, or the spinal cavity. Then ventral, we have thoracic cavity, which contains your heart and lungs and trachea, okay. Then we have the abdominal cavity, and we also have the pelvic cavity, okay. Quickly about membranes, there are three that we've talked about in those cavities. So the first is the pleural membrane that surrounds the lungs. Second is pericardium that surrounds the heart. And then we have peritoneum, which surrounds all the organs in your abdominopelvic cavity. Okay. Now, in these membranes, you're going to hear terms visceral and parietal. So think of these membranes and these cavities as a balloon, and the organs that are within them as a fist. Okay? So the organ would be this fist, the balloon is the cavity, and the membrane. Visceral is the inner layer of that sac, okay, of that membrane that is holding the organ. So that's the one that's touching it, visceral. It's the closest to it. And then parietal is the outer layer, okay? This is the layer that occupies the walls of whatever space it's in, okay? So like the parietal pleura, this would be the one that's touching the walls of the chest, okay? Visceral pleura would be the side that's touching the actual lungs themselves. Okay, now inside these membranes, you have serous fluid, which is a lubricating fluid. It's like the oil. It's not oil, but it's like the oil if we were talking about a machine, between the layers of each of those membranes. Okay, they need to be lubricated in order to allow movement, okay, because our lungs are moving constantly, our heart is moving constantly, so if we don't have any lubrication in there, they're not going to be able to freely move. Okay, organ systems quickly. We have 11, and you guys are getting an intro with the t-shirts, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but we've got integumentary, which is hair, skin, and nails. We need to know the physiology of these, okay, so make sure you look at what they do. Integumentary synthesizes vitamin D. It's the site of pain and sweat and oil glands. Okay, skeletal, it protects and supports our organs. It provides a framework for our muscles and cause movements. It actually is the site of blood cell formation and stores minerals. Muscular system allows manipulation of our environment, facial expression, and then maintaining our posture and producing heat, which, speaking of, I need to sit up straight. Okay, nervous system, it's our fast-acting control system, responds to internal and external changes by activating whatever needs to be activated. And then our endocrine system, this is the system that secretes hormones and regulates various processes within our bodies. Cardiovascular, this is the blood, okay, carries oxygen, carbon dioxide, and our nutrients. It also carries wastes as they are exiting the body. And then our heart is the machine that pumps the blood. Lymphatic, okay, this one is in charge of immunity, all right? It's what attacks, or what mounts the attack against any foreign substances that are getting in our body. picks up fluid that's leaked from the blood vessels and returns it to the blood, and it houses white blood cells. Our respiratory system, it keeps blood constantly supplied with oxygen, okay, but it also removes carbon dioxide because we can't have too much carbon dioxide in our body. We need to get that out. This occurs in the lungs. Okay, digestive system, this breaks down food into things that we can absorb and build up. We talked about that catabolism and anabolism. That's where this is happening, is in our digestive system. Okay, and the last three, we've got urinary. This eliminates nitrogenous waste from the body, regulates water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance of the blood. Remember, we've got to maintain that homeostasis, okay? And then male and female reproductive system, the main purpose is produce offspring. Okay, the testes in the male produce sperm and male sex hormones. And then in the female, the ovaries produce the eggs and the female sex hormones. Okay, everything else serves as sites for fertilization and the development of the fetus. That is it for today. Hope you guys have an excellent weekend.